know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as Special Agent Edmund Marsh leaned back in his worn leather chair, his weathered hands spreading out a collection of manila folders across his desk. The clock on his office wall read 9:47 p.m., but time had become meaningless in the last few weeks. The Chicago field office had emptied hours ago, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the damning evidence before him. He picked up a photograph, a young woman, no more than 20, her face peaceful in death. Maria Santiago. The official report said accidental overdose, but Edmund's gut told him different. He'd seen enough victims in his 25 years with the Bureau's Human Trafficking Task Force to know when something wasn't right. "You deserved better," he muttered, touching the edge of the photograph. The girl had done everything right, escaped her captors, sought protection from the Chicago PD, specifically from Detective Clay Holloway. 48 hours later, she was dead. The sound of footsteps in the hallway drew his attention. His partner, Special Agent Joy Montgomery, appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You're still here," she observed, placing 1 cup on his desk. Steam rose from the dark liquid, carrying the scent of the expensive beans she preferred. "Found something?" Edmund gestured to the timeline he'd constructed on his office wall. Red strings connected photographs, reports, and newspaper clippings spanning 2 decades. "It's not just Maria. Look at this pattern." Joy moved closer to the wall, her dark eyes scanning the information. All these victims passed through Holloway's precinct, and every single one died within days of making contact with law enforcement. Edmund stood, joining her at the wall. Overdoses, suicides, accidents, all neat and tidy explanations. "Too neat. Have you talked to Kendra about this?" Joy asked, mentioning his wife. "She might have insights from her liaison work." Edmund's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "She thinks I'm chasing shadows. Keeps pushing me to focus on retirement planning instead." A gentle knock interrupted them. Edmund's twins, Derek and Elena, stood in the doorway, still in their detective uniforms. Their presence was unexpected. They rarely visited him at work. "Dad," Elena started, her voice carrying an edge of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom sent us. She's worried about you." Derek stepped forward, his stance unconsciously mirroring his sister's. "This investigation people are talking. The department has procedures for handling these cases. You're stepping on toes." Edmund studied his children's faces. When had they become so invested in departmental politics? Their usual indifference to his work had shifted to an almost aggressive interest in recent weeks. "Since when do you two care about internal procedures?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. "I remember a time when you both thought rules were made to be broken." Elena exchanged a quick glance with her brother. "Things are different now. We've grown up. We understand how the system works." "The system?" Edmund repeated, noting how his daughter's hand unconsciously moved to touch her badge. "Or the people running it." "You're retiring in 3 months, Dad," Derek cut in. "Why rock the boat now? These cases, they're complicated. Sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie." Joy watched the exchange silently, her experienced investigator's eyes catching the subtle tensions in the room. The twins stood slightly too close together, their body language defensive. Edmund maintained his calm demeanor, but she could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. "Your mother put you up to this?" Edmund asked, though it wasn't really a question. "She's concerned," Elena replied. "We all are. You've had a great career, Dad. Don't tarnish it by pushing this. Whatever this is." Edmund turned back to his wall of evidence, his voice quiet but firm. 23 women died after seeking help from law enforcement. They deserve answers. If that tarnishes my career, so be it. "You're being stubborn," Derek snapped, an uncharacteristic flash of anger crossing his face. "This isn't your problem to solve." "Every victim is my problem," Edmund replied, turning to face his children. "That's what you both used to believe too. What changed?" The twins shifted uncomfortably, their synchronized movement almost choreographed. Elena opened her mouth to respond, but Derek touched her arm, a silent signal. "We should go," he said. "Just think about what we said, Dad. Please." Edmund watched them leave, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. Joy waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. "That was interesting," she observed, sipping her coffee. "Since when do they tag team you about cases?" Edmund picked up Maria Santiago's photograph again, studying it intently. "Since this case started pointing toward their precinct. Since I started asking questions about Holloway." "You think there's a connection?" "I think," Edmund said slowly, "that my children have never cared this much about my career choices before. I think my wife's sudden obsession with my retirement timing is oddly convenient. And I think Detective Holloway's name keeps coming up in ways that make me very uncomfortable." Joy moved to the evidence wall, tracing a red string from Maria's photograph to another victim. "Want me to run background on the twins' recent cases?" Edmund nodded, his expression grim. Quietly, "Something's not right here, Joy. I can feel it in my bones." As if to punctuate his words, his phone buzzed with a text from Kendra. "Coming home soon? We need to talk about your retirement party." Edmund stared at the message, then back at the wall of victims. 23 women who thought they'd found safety, only to die under suspicious circumstances. His gut told him this case would be his last, but not in the way his family seemed to want. "Go home," Joy said softly. "Get some rest. We'll dig deeper tomorrow." Edmund gathered his coat, his mind already mapping out next steps. As he left his office, Maria Santiago's photograph seemed to watch him go, her eyes holding secrets he was determined to uncover, no matter the cost. The following morning, Assistant Director Byron Shepard's secretary practically ambushed Edmund as he stepped off the elevator. Her usually composed demeanor was ruffled, adding to the sense of urgency in her voice. "Agent Marsh, Director Shepard needs you immediately. Secure conference room B." Edmund checked his watch, 7:30 a.m. Shepard rarely came in before 9. Whatever this was, it couldn't wait. The secure conference room hummed with technology, specialized white noise generators, signal blockers, and other countermeasures against surveillance. Shepard stood at the window, his broad shoulders tense under his perfectly tailored suit. He didn't turn when Edmund entered. "Close the door," he ordered, his voice grave. "What I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room." Edmund complied, noting the stack of files on the conference table, old files, judging by their worn edges and faded labels. A laptop sat open beside them, its screen showing what appeared to be DNA analysis results. "You've been digging into Detective Holloway," Shepard stated, finally turning to face him. "What made you start looking?" Edmund chose his words carefully. "Pattern recognition. Too many trafficking victims dying in protective custody, all connected to his precinct." Shepard nodded, as if Edmund had confirmed something. "Remember the Gateway serial killings?" "Early 90s, Edmund replied automatically. "Young runaways, mostly female, strangled with some kind of wire or cord. Task force ran for years, never caught the killer." He paused, a sudden connection forming. "Holloway was on that task force." "Not just on it," Shepard corrected, sliding over a yellowed newspaper clipping. "He led it. Rookie detective makes good, becomes the face of the investigation. Press loved him." Edmund studied the photograph. A younger Clay Holloway standing at a podium, his face earnest and determined. Behind him, barely visible in the crowd, stood a familiar figure. "Is that your wife?" Shepard finished. "Yes. She was working with victims' families back then. That's how she met Holloway." Edmund's mind raced, calculating dates. Kendra had been pregnant with the twins around that time. He'd been away frequently, working cases across state lines. Shepard tapped the laptop screen. "New DNA technology just matched 3 of your trafficking victims to the Gateway cases. Same killer, same signature. And here's where it gets complicated. All these victims passed through Holloway's precinct before disappearing." "Jesus," Edmund breathed, the implications hitting him hard. "You think Holloway?" "I think," Shepard interrupted, "that we need to be very careful how we proceed. This goes deeper than one corrupt cop. The Gateway Task Force had access to evidence, could control the narrative. If Holloway was involved, he had help," Edmund finished. "Inside the department." "Exactly." Shepard pulled out another file, this one marked with high security clearance stamps. We've been running surveillance on certain officers. The patterns we're seeing, it's organized. Professional. Edmund thought of his children's strange behavior, their sudden interest in his investigation. How high does this go? High enough that I'm putting together a joint task force with internal affairs. But we need to move carefully. These people have had decades to build their network, cover their tracks. A knock at the door made both men tense. Shepard's secretary entered, her face pale. Sir, Dr. Tina Page is here. She's asking to speak with Agent Marsh. Says it's about the Gateway cases. Edmund recognized the name. She'd been the forensic psychologist on the original investigation. Shepard's expression darkened. Send her to the secure facility on Jackson Street. Agent Marsh will meet her there in an hour. After the secretary left, Shepard turned to Edmund, his voice low. Page tried to raise concerns about Holloway back then. Nobody listened. A week later, her daughter barely survived a hit and run. She took a sabbatical, moved across country, and now she's back, Edmund mused. Why now? That's what you're going to find out. Shepard gathered the files, securing them in a classified pouch. But Edmund, watch your back. These people have been operating in plain sight for years. They won't go down easily. Edmund thought of Maria Santiago, of all the other victims, of his wife's sudden anxiety about his retirement, his children's strange behavior. 25 years of marriage, and he'd never questioned why Kendra had been so insistent that the twins follow Holloway into law enforcement. Sir, he said, hand on the door. If this goes where I think it's going, we'll deal with that when we have to, Shepard replied. For now, focus on Dr. Page. Whatever brought her back to Chicago after all these years, it must be important. Edmund nodded, his mind already preparing for the meeting ahead. As he left the conference room, he couldn't shake the feeling that his final case was about to become far more personal than he'd ever imagined. The secure FBI facility on Jackson Street looked abandoned from the outside, a deliberate deception. Edmund parked 2 blocks away, taking a circuitous route on foot, checking for tails out of habit. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between buildings, perfect cover for surveillance. Dr. Tina Page waited in interview room C, her appearance markedly different from the confident professional he remembered from old case photos. Her hair had gone completely gray, and her hands shook slightly as she arranged a thick file on the table before her. Agent Marsh, she greeted him, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for meeting me. I've been following your investigation into the trafficking cases. Edmund sat across from her, noting the security of her laptop, high-end encryption, multiple authentication devices visible. You've been gathering evidence. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. For years. After they threatened my family, I knew I couldn't stop investigating, but I had to be smarter about it. Create safeguards. They? Edmund prompted gently. Holloway. His network. She opened her file, revealing meticulous notes and photographs. Back then, during the Gateway investigation, I started noticing patterns. Inconsistencies in his reports. Witnesses whose statements changed after meeting with him. Evidence that disappeared from lockup. Edmund leaned forward. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Tina's laugh held no humor. I tried. The day after I raised concerns to my supervisor, a car nearly killed my daughter outside her school. The driver was never found, but I got the message. She pulled out a photograph, a teenage girl in a hospital bed, covered in casts and bandages. Emily was 13. She still walks with a limp. I'm sorry, Edmund said softly, but something made you decide to come forward now. Your wife, Tina replied, her eyes meeting his directly for the first time. When I saw her name connected to recent trafficking cases, I couldn't stay silent anymore. You need to understand what happened back then. Edmund felt a chill despite the room's warmth. What about my wife? Tina's hands shook as she pulled out another file. During the Gateway investigation, Kendra worked closely with the task force. She had access to victim profiles, family interviews, witness statements. At first, I thought she was just dedicated to her job, staying late, taking files home to review. She passed him a series of surveillance photos, Kendra entering and leaving the police station at odd hours, meeting with Holloway in out-of-the-way diners and parks. Then I noticed changes in the case files she handled. Witness statements that contradicted earlier versions. Evidence logs that didn't match my notes. When I started documenting these discrepancies, she touched her daughter's hospital photo. Well, you know what happened. Edmund's throat felt dry. When did you first suspect that she was working with Holloway? Or that she was carrying his children? The words hit Edmund like physical blows. He stared at Tina, unable to form a response. I'm sorry, she continued, her voice gentle. I thought, when she announced her pregnancy, I assumed you knew. She was working so closely with the task force, and you were away so often. The timing. Edmund's mind raced through memories, Kendra's odd behavior during the pregnancy, attributed to work stress. Her insistence that the twins follow Holloway into law enforcement. Their striking resemblance to the detective, which he dismissed as coincidence. Why come forward now? He managed finally. Tina opened her laptop, typing rapidly. Because history is repeating itself. The trafficking victims you're investigating, their deaths mirror the Gateway killings. Same methods, same cover-ups. But this time, she turned the screen toward him. This time I have proof. The screen showed financial records, surveillance photos, transcribed phone conversations, years of carefully gathered evidence linking Holloway to both the original murders and the recent trafficking deaths. Kendra's been using her position as liaison to identify potential witnesses, Tina explained. When victims seek protection, she makes sure they're directed to Holloway's precinct. After that, she gestured to the victim photos on Edmund's wall. The twins, Edmund said suddenly. Do they know? Tina's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I don't know, but their recent case assignments, they've all involved potential trafficking witnesses. Witnesses who later died in custody or disappeared. Edmund thought of his children's recent visit to his office, their insistence that he drop the investigation. Had they known what they were really protecting? I've arranged for all this evidence to be released to multiple sources if anything happens to me, Tina continued. Offshore servers, deadman switches, I learned from last time. But you need to be careful, Agent Marsh. These people, they've had decades to perfect their operation. They won't hesitate to eliminate threats. Even family? Edmund asked, though he already knew the answer. Especially family, Tina replied. They use those connections, exploit them. Your position in the FBI, your children's roles in the department. It's all part of their protection network. Edmund stood, needing to move. 25 years of marriage, built on lies. His children, not his children, possibly involved in covering up murders. An entire life constructed around deception. I need to know everything, he said finally, returning to his seat. From the beginning, Tina nodded, pulling out more documents. It started with the first Gateway victim in '94. Holly Martinez, 16, runaway. She made contact with Holloway, claimed she had information about a trafficking ring operating through Chicago. 2 days later, she was found strangled. She laid out photographs chronologically, young faces, all bearing the same ligature marks around their necks. The pattern was always the same. Victims would approach law enforcement with information about trafficking. Holloway would take point on their protection. Within days, they'd be dead. And Kendra's role? At first, she was just like me, trying to help victims. But Holloway... Tina paused, choosing her words carefully. He has a way of identifying people he can use. He saw something in Kendra, ambition maybe, or vulnerability. He started grooming her, sharing case details, making her feel special. Edmund remembered those early days, Kendra's excitement about her work, her admiration for the dedicated detective leading the Gateway Task Force. How had he been so blind? By the time she realized what was really happening, she was already compromised, Tina continued. And then she got pregnant. Holloway saw it as an opportunity, a way to ensure loyalty, to place his own people within law enforcement. The twins, Edmund muttered. He planned it all along. They were raised to idolize him, Tina confirmed. Their Uncle Clay, who helped shape their careers, guided their assignments. The perfect cover. Who would suspect a decorated detective mentoring his colleagues' children? A thought struck Edmund. The recent trafficking victims, Maria Santiago and the others. Were they getting close to exposing something? Tina's expression grew grave. They weren't just random victims, Agent Marsh. They were starting to connect the present to the past. Maria especially. She had evidence linking current trafficking operations to the Gateway killings. Evidence that could have exposed decades of corruption. She pulled up another file on her laptop, surveillance photos of Maria meeting with various officers, including Derek and Elena. Your children were assigned to her protective detail. Whether they knew it or not, they helped deliver her right into Holloway's hands. Edmund felt sick. His twins, he couldn't help but still think of them that way. Had they knowingly participated in murder? Or were they just pawns in Holloway's game, like he had been? There's more, Tina said quietly. Your retirement party next month. It's not just a celebration. Edmund remembered Kendra's insistence on holding it at the Police Officers Association building, her careful management of the guest list. They're planning something. It's their chance to tie up loose ends, Tina confirmed. You're getting too close, asking too many questions. They can't risk you continuing the investigation after retirement. And Kendra? She's been meeting with Holloway more frequently in the past month. Tina's hands shook as she closed her laptop. Whatever's happening, they're getting nervous. You need to be careful. They've had decades to perfect their methods. Edmund thought of his office wall, covered in victim photos, the connections he'd been making. How many times had Kendra visited? Seen what he was working on? How much had she reported back to Holloway? What's your recommendation? He asked finally. Work with your task force, but trust no one outside it, Tina advised. Holloway has people everywhere, police, judiciary, even some federal agencies. I've survived this long by assuming everyone is compromised until proven otherwise. She handed him a small encrypted drive. Everything I've collected is here. Evidence, connections, patterns. But be careful how you use it. Once they realize you know, they'll have to move against me, Edmund finished. Maybe they already are. His phone buzzed, a text from Kendra, finalizing guest list for retirement party. Need to discuss security arrangements. Tina saw his expression. Edmund checked his phone and frowned. Thank you, Dr. Page, for everything. I'll need time to process all this. She hesitated at the door. Remember, they're not just criminals, Agent Marsh. They're family. That makes them more dangerous, not less. Edmund watched her leave, thinking of Maria Santiago, of all the other victims, of his wife's recent nervous attention to his retirement plans, of his children's insistence that he drop the investigation. Family secrets, he was learning, could be the deadliest kind. Outside, the sun had set, casting Chicago's skyline in shadows. Edmund sat alone in the interview room, the weight of 25 years of lies pressing down on him. His last case had just become a race against time, not just to expose a criminal enterprise, but to survive his own family's betrayal. The Chicago Police Officers Association building stood imposing against the late afternoon sky, its brick facade weathered by decades of Lake Michigan winters. Special Agent Joy Montgomery adjusted her earpiece for the third time in as many minutes, watching unmarked vehicles take their positions around the perimeter. All units in position, crackled a voice in her ear. Awaiting your signal. From her vantage point in a surveillance van across the street, Joy could see guests arriving for Edmund Marsh's retirement party. Each face triggered a quiet confirmation from her team, officers from Internal Affairs, FBI agents, and carefully vetted members of the Chicago PD's anti-corruption unit. Target vehicle approaching, another voice reported. Black SUV, diplomatic plates. Joy watched Clay Holloway's vehicle pull into the reserved parking space. The detective emerged looking every inch the decorated officer. Silver hair perfectly groomed, uniform pristine, brass gleaming. Few would suspect the darkness that lay beneath that polished exterior. I have visual on the twins, her partner reported. Through the van's monitors, Joy watched Derek and Elena Marsh greeting guests at the entrance. Their smiles seemed genuine, but their eyes constantly scanned the crowd, a behavior she'd noted in countless surveillance operations. Her phone buzzed, a text from Edmund. Kendra insisting on making the arrangements herself, playing right into our hands. The past 3 months had been a careful dance of deception. After Dr. Page's revelations, Edmund had approached Joy with a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. Instead of confronting his wife and children immediately, they would use his retirement party as an opportunity to expose the entire network. "It's perfect," he had explained during one of their secure meetings. "They think they're setting a trap for me, but they're really gathering all their conspirators in one place." The operation had required incredible precision. Working with internal affairs, they had planted undercover agents throughout the department, gathering evidence that connected human trafficking operations to Holloway's network of corrupt officers. Each piece of evidence was carefully documented, each witness statement protected through multiple layers of security. Joy's team had discovered that Holloway wasn't just covering up crimes. He was the architect of a sophisticated trafficking operation that used his position within the Chicago PD to protect routes through the city. His influence extended into multiple precincts, with officers on his payroll ensuring that potential witnesses disappeared or died in accidents. Through her earpiece, Joy heard the party getting underway. Edmund's voice carried clearly through the hidden microphone he wore. "I'm overwhelmed by this turnout. 25 years with the Bureau, and I never expected—" "Cut the modesty, darling," Kendra's voice interrupted. Joy noticed how Edmund's wife kept one hand possessively on his arm, playing the role of proud spouse. "You deserve every bit of recognition." The surveillance monitors showed Holloway working the room, sharing jokes with fellow officers, accepting congratulations on his protégé's success. The twins shadowed him like satellites, their movements so synchronized they appeared choreographed. "Package secured," came another whisper through Joy's earpiece. In the building's basement, a technical team had finished setting up the presentation that would expose everything: surveillance footage, financial records, DNA evidence linking Holloway to both the Gateway killings and recent trafficking victims. Joy checked her watch. 1 hour until the scheduled tribute presentation. 1 hour until years of careful investigation came to fruition. 1 hour until Edmund's world publicly shattered, though she knew his real grief had begun months ago with Dr. Page's revelations. Through the monitors, she watched Kendra approaching the podium, champagne glass in hand. The woman's confidence was remarkable. She truly believed this was her moment of triumph, her chance to humiliate the man she deceived for 25 years. "Remember," Joy spoke quietly into her comm unit, "we wait for the signal. No matter what happens, no one moves until Edmund gives the word." She thought back to the day Edmund had first shared his suspicions about the trafficking victims' deaths. How many lives might have been saved if they'd uncovered this conspiracy sooner? How many young women had disappeared into Holloway's network while good officers looked the other way? The party continued inside, a carefully orchestrated facade of celebration masking the tension building beneath the surface. Joy watched Edmund circulating among the guests, accepting handshakes and good wishes, playing his part perfectly. Only someone who knew him well would notice the steel in his eyes, the careful way he positioned himself to keep both Holloway and the twins in his line of sight. "Director Shepard has arrived," came another update. "All principles are now in play." Joy nodded, though no one could see her. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Yet something nagged at her instincts. The operation seemed almost too perfect, too smooth. In her experience, the most dangerous moments came when things appeared to be going exactly as planned. She keyed her microphone. "All units maintain positions. Stay alert for any deviations from the expected scenario." Through the monitors, she watched the pieces of their trap sliding into place, praying they hadn't underestimated their opponents. After all, Holloway and his network had managed to operate undetected for decades. People that clever, that patient, were capable of anything. The next hour would either expose decades of corruption or prove catastrophically fatal to their investigation. And somewhere in that building, Edmund Marsh prepared to face the moment when his family's betrayal would become public knowledge. Joy touched her sidearm, a habit born of years in the field. Whatever happened next, she would ensure her partner didn't face it alone. The reception hall of the Police Officers Association building hummed with conversation and laughter, the atmosphere carefully cultivated to mask the tension running beneath the surface. Edmund stood near the bar, watching the room's reflection in the mirrored wall behind the bottles. Every face held new meaning now. Which officers were knowingly complicit in Holloway's network? which were innocent dupes like he had been. Kendra appeared at his elbow, her perfume familiar yet suddenly cloying. Time for the special presentation, darling. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Clay has prepared something wonderful. Edmund allowed her to guide him toward the front of the room, noting how she positioned herself between him and the nearest exit. Behind them, Holloway took the stage, his commanding presence drawing all eyes. Friends, colleagues, family, Holloway began, his voice carrying that same warmth that had fooled so many for so long. We're here tonight to honor a man who's given 25 years to the Bureau, who's been a partner to Chicago PD in countless investigations. He paused, his eyes finding Edmund's. And who's been like a father to my finest officers. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Edmund felt Kendra's hand tighten on his arm, her nails digging into his flesh through his jacket. Across the room, Derek and Elena moved to flank the exits. Oh yes, Holloway continued, his mask of congeniality slipping. I think it's time we acknowledge some family secrets, don't you, Kendra? Edmund's wife released his arm, walking deliberately toward the stage. The change in her was remarkable. Gone was the nervous energy of recent months, replaced by a cold confidence he'd never seen before. 25 years of marriage, 2 kids, and he never figured out why they all became cops like their real daddy. Kendra's voice rang with triumph as she perched herself on Holloway's lap. You were always so busy with your cases, Edmund. So dedicated to justice. Did you never wonder why I insisted the twins follow Clay's career path? Derek and Elena stepped forward, their badges held high. The synchronized movement that had bothered Edmund for so long now made perfect sense. They'd been performing it their entire lives. Blood is thicker than your pension. Old man, Derek called out. You were good till you paid our bills. Now you're nothing to us. Edmund allowed his shoulders to slump, playing the part of a broken man. He could feel the pity and discomfort radiating from the crowd. This was the moment Kendra and Holloway had planned. His public humiliation, his authority and reputation destroyed in front of his colleagues. Nothing to say? Holloway taunted. The great FBI agent, speechless at last? Edmund straightened slowly, meeting Holloway's gaze. Actually, I do have something to say. His voice carried clearly through the sudden silence. Let me tell you a secret. Your real daddy has been under investigation for murder, and you loyal kids just helped me solve the case. The smug smile froze on Holloway's face. Kendra started to rise, but Edmund's next words froze her in place. Director Shepard? I believe we're ready for that evidence presentation now. Before anyone could react, every screen in the room blazed to life. Joy Montgomery's team had done their work well. The images were crystal clear, undeniable. Surveillance footage showed Holloway meeting with known trafficking rings. Financial records detailed payments to corrupt officers. DNA evidence linked him conclusively to both the Gateway killings and recent trafficking victims. You see, Edmund continued, his voice steady, while you were planning my retirement party, I was building a case. Every meeting you took, every call you made, every victim you silenced, we were watching, recording, building the evidence that would bring down not just you, but your entire network. Kendra's face had lost all color. You couldn't. You didn't. No. Edmund finished for her. I've known since Dr. Page came forward. Everything since then has been carefully planned. Right down to this moment. Holloway surged to his feet, reaching for his weapon, but found himself surrounded by agents who had been posing as wait staff. Around the room, other undercover operatives revealed themselves, weapons drawn. It's over, Clay, Edmund said quietly. The trafficking routes, the Gateway killings, the years of corruption. All of it ends tonight. Derek and Elena tried to break for the exits, but found their paths blocked by internal affairs officers. The twins' faces showed confusion giving way to dawning horror as more evidence appeared on the screens. Their own unwitting involvement in delivering victims to their father's operation. You used your own children, Edmund's voice carried a weight of disgust. Raised them to be unknowing accomplices in your crimes. What kind of father does that? The kind who knows how to inspire loyalty? Holloway snarled, but his bravado was cracking. His eyes darted around the room, counting weapons, measuring odds. Loyalty? Edmund laughed without humor. Look around, Clay. Your loyal officers are already turning on you. See how quickly they're dropping their weapons, holding up their hands. They know what's coming: federal charges, RICO indictments, conspiracy to commit murder. Who do you think will stay loyal when facing life in prison? Kendra made a sudden move toward her purse, but Joy Montgomery was faster. I wouldn't, she advised, her weapon steady. That recording device you're reaching for? We already have copies of everything on it, including your conversations about silencing Maria Santiago. The mention of Maria's name sent a visible shudder through the room. Many of the officers present had known her, had watched her die in protective custody. Now they understood why. You really think this will stick? Holloway's voice dripped contempt. I've beaten investigations before. My contacts. Your contacts are being arrested as we speak, Edmund interrupted. While you were all here, federal agents were executing warrants across 3 states. Your entire network is coming down, Clay. The only question is who'll be first to cooperate in exchange for leniency. The twins stood frozen, their world collapsing around them. Elena's voice broke the tension. Dad, we didn't know. About the trafficking, the murders, we thought. You thought you were following in your father's footsteps, Edmund finished gently. In a way, you were. Just not the father you thought you were honoring. The screens surrounding the reception hall painted the room in a harsh electronic glow as Joy Montgomery methodically presented the evidence they'd gathered. Each new revelation drew gasps or muttered curses from the assembled officers, many of whom were only now realizing the true scope of corruption they'd been adjacent to. Surveillance footage from March 15th, Joy narrated as crystal-clear video played. Detective Holloway meeting with known trafficking operators at the Port of Chicago. The timestamp matched perfectly with shipping manifests displayed alongside. Manifests showing cargo containers that had passed through customs without inspection. Financial records spanning 2 decades. Another screen filled with transaction data, each entry meticulously annotated. Payments routed through shell companies, offshore accounts, all eventually tracing back to enterprises controlled by members of this department. Edmund watched his wife's face as the evidence mounted. Kendra sat rigid in a chair, flanked by federal agents, her carefully maintained facade crumbling with each new revelation. The woman he'd loved for 25 years was a stranger to him now. Most damning are the recordings, Joy continued, activating another screen. Kendra's voice filled the room, casual and businesslike as she discussed the disposal of potential witnesses with Holloway. The timestamps were recent, conversations about Maria Santiago and other trafficking victims who had died in custody. You'll notice, Joy pointed out, how these conversations align perfectly with case files from Detective Holloway's precinct. Each victim who sought protection was systematically isolated, their statements altered or destroyed before they met with tragic accidents. The technical team had done exceptional work, creating visual timelines that showed the pattern of corruption evolving over years. Red lines connected victims to officers, officers to payments, payments to trafficking operations. At the center of it all sat Holloway, his influence spreading like a cancer through the department. The Gateway serial killings weren't just unsolved cases. Edmund took over the presentation, his voice steady despite the emotion churning inside him. They were the foundation of this entire criminal enterprise. Young runaways who discovered too much, who threatened to expose the trafficking operations. They became Holloway's victims. More evidence appeared, DNA analysis linking Holloway to both the historic Gateway killings and recent trafficking victims. Dr. Page's meticulous documentation provided context, showing how the pattern had evolved from opportunistic murders to a systematic operation for silencing witnesses. Mrs. Singleton, Joy addressed Kendra formally. Your position as police department liaison wasn't just convenient cover. It was essential to the operation. She activated another set of recordings, Kendra's voice directing vulnerable witnesses away from legitimate protection and toward Holloway's precinct. You identified potential threats, Joy continued, used your position to gain their trust, then delivered them directly into the hands of their killers, all while maintaining the perfect image of a dedicated public servant. The twins sat apart from their mother now, their faces ashen as they watched video of themselves following Holloway's special assignments, unknowingly helping to isolate and control trafficking victims who later died in custody. Derek and Elena Marsh, Joy's voice softened slightly, were carefully positioned throughout their careers to support this operation, though evidence suggests they were unaware of its true nature. Their assignments, supervised by Detective Holloway, consistently involved handling witnesses who later disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances. Edmund watched his children. He couldn't help still thinking of them that way, as the full horror of their unwitting involvement became clear. Elena had her face in her hands, while Derek stared straight ahead, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The operation extended beyond Chicago. Joy continued, bringing up maps showing trafficking routes through multiple states. Detective Holloway's network included corrupt officers in neighboring jurisdictions, customs officials, even judges in some districts, all connected through a sophisticated system of payments and blackmail. She activated a final screen, showing a complex web of relationships and transactions. This map represents just the connections we've confirmed so far. Each line represents evidence that will stand up in federal court: witness statements, financial records, surveillance footage, DNA evidence, and more. The room had grown deathly quiet as the magnitude of the conspiracy became clear. Officers who had worked alongside Holloway for years now saw him for what he truly was, not just a corrupt cop, but a murderer who had built an empire on human suffering. I want to be very clear. Joy's voice carried authority and warning in equal measure. This investigation is ongoing. Anyone in this room who has information about these crimes has exactly one opportunity to cooperate. After tonight, the deals come off the table. Edmund watched as several officers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Holloway and the exits. The brotherhood of silence that had protected this corruption for so long was cracking under the weight of federal indictments. 25 years, he said quietly, but in the silence his voice carried. 25 years I investigated human trafficking while the answers were right in my own home. Every victim we couldn't save, every witness who disappeared. The truth was sitting across from me at dinner. Kendra finally broke her silence, her voice bitter. You were always so dedicated to your precious victims. Did you ever wonder why I stopped practicing law? Why I took that liaison position? Clay understood what was really important: power, control, survival. Survival? Edmund's voice cracked with disbelief. You helped murder innocent women, used our children as unwitting accomplices. All for what? Money? Power? For family? Holloway interjected, his trademark confidence still intact despite the handcuffs on his wrists. Something you never understood, Edmund. Everything I did was to build a legacy. Those kids you're so concerned about? I gave them purpose, direction, careers. You used them. Joy cut in, bringing up more footage. Here's what real family looks like. Detective Holloway. The screen showed a series of images. Derek and Elena as rookie officers, being steered toward specific assignments. Surveillance photos of Holloway monitoring their progress, directing their careers with calculated precision. Each special assignment was designed to compromise them further, Joy explained to the room. Every time they unknowingly helped control or transport a witness, they became more implicated in the operation. Their own badges became their prison. Elena looked up at this, her face tear-streaked but hardening with anger. All those women, the ones you said needed special handling, they were trying to expose you, weren't they? And we helped. You helped protect the department, Kendra snapped. Protected your father's work. Everything we did was for you kids. Stop it, Derek exploded, standing so suddenly his chair clattered backward. You didn't do any of this for us. You used us. Our whole lives. Everything we thought we were. It was all just part of your sick game. The evidence continued to unfold on the screens. Years of careful manipulation and calculated grooming, all designed to create the perfect cover for Holloway's operation. The twins' careers, their assignments, even their choice of precincts. Nothing had been left to chance. Joy's team had done exceptional work, creating a presentation that was both comprehensive and devastating. There would be no escape through legal technicalities or claimed misunderstandings. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. We have cooperating witnesses, Joy announced, bringing up a final set of documents. Officers who worked under Detective Holloway, trafficking victims who survived, family members of the Gateway victims, all ready to testify. The U.S. Attorney's Office is prepared to proceed with RICO charges, multiple counts of murder, human trafficking, conspiracy. The list continued, each charge another nail in the coffin of Holloway's empire. Throughout the room, officers who had once admired him now couldn't meet his eyes. The legendary detective, mentor to generations of Chicago cops, stood revealed as a monster who had corrupted everything he touched. As the final pieces of evidence were displayed, Edmund felt a profound exhaustion settle over him. His retirement party had become something else entirely, a funeral for the life he'd thought he had, the family he'd believed in. The screens faded to black, leaving the room in stunned silence. Decades of corruption, murder, and trafficking laid bare in a single evening. Lives destroyed, careers ruined, and at the center of it all, a family shattered beyond repair. Joy Montgomery stepped forward, her voice carrying the full authority of the federal government. Detective Clay Holloway, Kendra Singleton, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. The familiar words echoed through the reception hall as more agents moved in. Edmund watched as his wife and her lover were led away in handcuffs, their empire of lies finally crumbling around them. Behind him, his children, victims themselves in so many ways, sat shell-shocked in the ruins of everything they believed about their lives. As the arrests proceeded, Edmund watched his carefully constructed operation reach its culmination. Years of corruption had been exposed, but this was just the beginning. The real work, dismantling Holloway's network and bringing all the conspirators to justice, still lay ahead. The handcuffs clicked shut around Clay Holloway's wrists with a finality that echoed through the suddenly silent reception hall. Federal agents maintained their positions at every exit, weapons still drawn, though the immediate threat had passed. The evidence presentation that had exposed decades of corruption still flickered on the surrounding screens, casting an accusatory glow over the assembled officers. Edmund Marsh stood at the center of the chaos, his retirement party transformed into the culmination of a massive federal investigation. But his focus wasn't on Holloway or even Kendra. His attention fixed solely on the twins, Derek and Elena, who sat shell-shocked at a nearby table. "Secure the prisoner," Joy Montgomery ordered, her voice carrying the full authority of the Bureau. As agents moved to escort Holloway away, Edmund approached his children. Everything that would happen next, the arrests, the processing, the inevitable media storm, could wait. This moment, this conversation, had to come first. "Dad." Elena's voice cracked on the word, uncertainty making her sound young again. The confidence she displayed earlier, when standing with Holloway, had evaporated in the face of undeniable evidence. "I need you both to listen carefully," Edmund said, pulling up a chair to sit across from them. Behind him, he could hear Kendra being read her rights, her usual poise replaced by bitter accusations and threats. He tuned it out, focusing entirely on the two people who were as much victims as anyone else in this case. "I've known about your paternity for months," he began, watching their faces closely, "since Dr. Page came forward with her evidence. But what you don't know, what you need to understand, is that your mother and Holloway have been using you from the beginning." Derek's jaw clenched, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "The special assignments. Those women you were tasked with handling?" Edmund's voice remained gentle despite the horror of what he had to reveal. "The ones Holloway said needed special protection? You were unknowingly helping traffic young women, some of them younger than you." The color drained from Elena's face as the implications hit her. "Maria Santiago," she whispered. "She kept trying to tell me something about the department, about Uncle Clay. And you reported every conversation directly to him, just like you were trained to do," Edmund confirmed. "You both did exactly what they raised you to do. Follow orders, maintain the chain of command, trust your superiors. Those women," Derek's voice shook with dawning comprehension. "All those witnesses we processed, they all died in custody. Or disappeared. Every single one." Joy approached their table, tablet in hand. "I need to show you something," she said quietly, pulling up a series of case files. These are all the assignments you've handled over the past 5 years. Notice the pattern? The twins leaned forward, their faces illuminated by the screen. Each file showed a similar progression: vulnerable witnesses placed under their protection, subsequent reports noting increasingly erratic behavior, then final notations of death by overdose or suicide. You were their perfect cover, Joy explained. Second-generation cops, children of a respected FBI agent, protégés of a decorated detective. Who would question your reports? Who would look too closely at witnesses in your custody? Elena pushed away from the table abruptly, barely making it to a nearby trash can before being violently ill. Derek sat frozen, his eyes locked on the evidence of their unwitting complicity in countless deaths. I remember them, he said numbly. Their faces, their stories. They were so scared, but we told them they were safe. We promised them protection. Edmund reached across the table, touching his son's hand. The fact that they weren't biologically his had stopped mattering long ago. These were his children, and they were drowning in the horror of what had been done to them. Listen to me, both of you, he said as Elena returned, wiping her mouth with a trembling hand. You were used, groomed from birth for this role. Everything, from your career choices to your specific assignments, was orchestrated to make you perfect tools in their operation. Why? Elena's voice cracked. Why would they? Our own mother. Because it worked, Joy answered, her tone professional but not unkind. Your presence legitimized everything. Suspicious deaths in custody? Just unfortunate accidents, verified by the impeccable Marsh twins. Witness changing their story? Must be telling the truth to such respected young officers. Your badges didn't just make you part of their proud legacy. They made you the perfect unwitting accomplices. Through the windows, emergency lights painted the night in rotating patterns of red and blue. More law enforcement vehicles were arriving. This was only the beginning of what would become a massive operation to dismantle Holloway's network. What happens now? Derek asked, still staring at the case files that detailed their innocent participation in so many deaths. That depends partly on you, Edmund replied carefully. The U.S. Attorney's Office will want to talk to both of you. Everything you know about the department, about Holloway's operations, about these cases, it could be crucial to building an airtight case. They'll want to verify that you were truly unaware, Joy added. Dr. Page's evidence supports this. Her documentation shows how carefully you were manipulated, how information was compartmentalized to keep you in the dark. But your cooperation will be essential. Elena looked up, her face tear-streaked but hardening with determination. Those women, we owe them the truth. All of it. Everything we can remember about how the cases were handled, who was involved. It won't bring them back. Derek's voice was hollow. No, Edmund agreed. But it might help us save others. Holloway's network extends far beyond Chicago. There are other victims, other trafficking operations still active. Your testimony could help us shut it all down. Through the glass doors of the reception hall, they could see Holloway being led to a waiting vehicle. The legendary detective's head was high, his bearing still proud despite the handcuffs. Kendra followed in the custody of other agents, her earlier bravado replaced by a cold, calculating silence. They're really going to prison, Elena said softly, watching her mother disappear into another vehicle. Our whole lives, everything we thought we knew, was a lie, Derek finished. But what does that make us? Everything we've done as officers makes you victims of an elaborate conspiracy, Joy interjected firmly, and potentially key witnesses in dismantling it. But first, she glanced at Edmund, we need your formal statements. Everything you can tell us about how Holloway operated, how cases were assigned, who else might have been involved. Edmund watched his children absorbing the magnitude of what lay ahead. The statements, the investigations, the inevitable media scrutiny. They looked simultaneously older and younger than their years, crushed by revelation, but somehow not completely broken. I know it's overwhelming, he said gently, but you're not alone in this. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. The twins exchanged a look, the silent communication they developed over a lifetime. Then Elena straightened her shoulders, an echo of the confident officer she'd been just hours ago. Where do we start? The following weeks unfolded in a blur of depositions, evidence reviews, and increasingly shocking revelations. The conference room at the federal building had become their second home, its walls now covered with timeline charts and connection maps that grew more complex by the day. Edmund sat beside Joy Montgomery, watching as Elena carefully walked the U.S. Attorney's team through another case file. His daughter's voice had grown stronger over the weeks, the initial shock of betrayal hardening into determination to expose every detail of the conspiracy that had shaped her life. The victim was Lisa Chun, 22, Elena explained, pointing to a photograph. She approached me specifically, said she had information about trafficking operations through the Port of Chicago. Following department procedure, following what Holloway had trained us to do, I logged her statement but reported directly to him. The prosecutors nodded, taking detailed notes. They'd heard dozens of similar stories over the past weeks, each one adding another piece to the massive criminal enterprise they were uncovering. 3 days later, Elena continued, her voice catching slightly. She died of an apparent overdose in protective custody. The toxicology report was signed by Dr. Marcus Webb. Webb, Joy noted, adding another name to their growing list of conspirators. He signed off on several similar cases, always ruling them accidents or suicides. In another room down the hall, Derek was working with internal affairs, methodically reviewing years of case assignments and departmental procedures. His insider knowledge of precinct operations had already helped identify numerous corrupt officers and compromised officials. The full story had emerged piece by devastating piece. Clay Holloway hadn't started as a criminal mastermind. He'd begun as a corrupt cop protecting existing trafficking routes through Chicago. But when victims started threatening to expose him, he'd evolved into something far more dangerous. The Gateway killings were his solution to potential witnesses, Edmund explained to the assembled prosecutors. Young runaways who discovered too much, who couldn't be silenced through normal channels. But he needed help managing the investigations, controlling the evidence. That's where Mom came in, Elena added, the word mom carrying a weight of bitterness now. As a victim's advocate, she had access to witness statements, family contacts, investigation details. She could identify threats early, steer victims away from legitimate help. Joy pulled up another series of documents on the main screen. Kendra Singleton's position was crucial to the operation's growth. She could spot potential witnesses before they went to other authorities, ensure they were directed to Holloway's Precinct 4 protection, and when she became pregnant, one of the prosecutors said carefully, glancing at Elena, "We were the perfect opportunity," Elena finished grimly, a chance to place loyal officers within the department. Except their loyalty was built on lies. The evidence Dr. Page had gathered over the years proved invaluable. Her meticulous documentation showed how Holloway had systematically expanded his influence, using a combination of bribes, blackmail, and strategic promotions to build his network. The seaport was key, Derek explained, joining them after his IA session. Corrupt customs officials, dock workers on the payroll, even shipping companies involved in the trafficking. Everything looked legitimate on paper because the right people were paid to look the other way. Edmund watched his children working with the investigation teams, pride mixing with lingering sorrow. They'd thrown themselves into exposing the conspiracy with the same dedication they'd once shown to their police work. Each new revelation seemed to strengthen their resolve, rather than break them further. The hardest part, Elena admitted during a rare quiet moment, is knowing how many people we trusted were involved. Captain Rivera, Lieutenant Chen, even Rabbi Goldman from the chaplain's office. They all played their parts. They preyed on that trust, Edmund reminded her. Used your integrity against you. The investigation had expanded far beyond Chicago, uncovering trafficking networks that spanned multiple states. Each new arrest led to more revelations, more connections, more evidence of how deep the corruption had spread. Dr. Page's system of offshore servers and deadman switches had protected her evidence until it was needed. Now that same evidence was helping prosecutors build an airtight case against not just Holloway and Kendra, but dozens of other conspirators. It's like a cancer, Joy observed, studying their latest organizational chart. Once it started, it just kept growing, spreading through departments, jurisdictions, even state lines. But we're cutting it out, Derek said firmly. All of it. No matter who gets exposed. The twins had proven invaluable to the investigation, their intimate knowledge of department operations helping identify corrupt officers and compromise procedures. Their testimony, combined with Dr. Page's evidence, was creating a case that would be virtually impossible to defend against. You should know, Joy told them one evening, your cooperation, plus the evidence showing you were unaware of the true nature of your assignments. The U.S. Attorney is considering offering you immunity. Elena and Derek exchanged looks. We don't deserve special treatment, Elena said quietly. Those women died because of us. You were victims too, Edmund reminded them. Used by the people who should have protected you. Maybe, Derek acknowledged, but we still have a responsibility. To those women, to their families, to everyone who trusted us to protect them. The reckoning continued, each day bringing new arrests, new evidence, new understanding of how extensive the corruption had become. But with each revelation, each piece of the puzzle they uncovered, the path to justice became clearer. 6 months after the dramatic events at the Police Officers Association building, Edmund sat in the federal courthouse, watching as the verdicts were read. The case had grown far beyond its original scope, exposing trafficking networks and corruption across multiple states. Judge Miranda Chin's voice carried clearly through the packed courtroom. In the matter of the United States versus Clay Holloway, on the charge of first-degree murder, this court finds the defendant guilty. The litany continued: human trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, corruption, count after count, verdict after verdict. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Each word another brick in the wall of justice that would ensure Holloway never saw freedom again. Kendra's trial had concluded the previous week. Guilty of conspiracy, accessory to multiple felonies, obstruction of justice. Her composed facade had finally cracked when the judge announced her sentence. 25 years, one for each year she'd helped maintain Holloway's deadly operation. The twins sat with Edmund, their faces solemn as they watched their biological father's fate being sealed. They'd received immunity in exchange for their testimony, their unwitting role in the conspiracy proven beyond doubt. But the price of that immunity was high. They would never work in law enforcement again. The department thanks the witnesses for their cooperation, Judge Chun continued, particularly detectives Derek and Elena Marsh, whose testimony proved crucial in exposing this criminal enterprise. Their commitment to justice, even at great personal cost, exemplifies the highest ideals of law enforcement. Elena squeezed her brother's hand, tears sliding silently down her face. They'd lost their careers, their mother, the man they'd thought was their hero, but they'd helped save countless lives by bringing down the trafficking network. Joy Montgomery, recently promoted to head of the Human Trafficking Task Force, sat nearby. Her team's work had been exemplary, gathering evidence that connected cold cases across 3 states. The investigation had rescued dozens of trafficking victims and prevented countless others from falling into Holloway's network. As they left the courthouse, Dr. Alberta Maynard fell into step beside Edmund. The forensic expert had provided crucial evidence linking the cold cases to current investigations, her testimony helping to establish the pattern of corruption that spanned decades. Sometimes the hardest cases are the ones closest to home, she observed quietly. Edmund nodded, thinking of all they'd lost and gained in the pursuit of justice. The trafficking victims they'd saved, the cold cases they'd solved, the corrupt system they'd exposed. His career was ending, but his commitment to justice had never wavered. The truth matters, he replied, no matter who it hurts. Outside, reporters clamored for statements, cameras flashing in the late afternoon sun. But Edmund led his family away from the media circus, toward a future that would be built on truth rather than deception. The twins had already begun planning their new lives. Elena considering law school, Derek talking about victims' advocacy work. They would never wear badges again, but their dedication to helping others remained unshaken. Joy caught up with them at the corner, her expression serious but satisfied. The task force is expanding, she reported. Using evidence from this case, we've identified trafficking operations in 5 more states. It's going to take time, but we'll shut them all down. Good, Edmund said simply. The case that had started with one victim, Maria Santiago, had grown into something far larger than anyone had imagined. But in the end, justice had prevailed. As they walked away from the courthouse, Edmund thought about all the victims, those they'd lost and those they'd saved. about the price of truth and the cost of deception, about family bonds forged by love rather than blood. His career might be ending, but the impact of his final case would resonate for years to come. The truth had finally emerged, justice had been served, and somewhere, perhaps, Maria Santiago and all the other victims could rest a little easier. The afternoon sun cast long shadows behind them as they walked together, a family rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. They had lost much, but they had gained something precious. The knowledge that they had chosen truth over lies, justice over loyalty, right over wrong. And in the end, that was what really mattered. Epilogue. 10 years later, the maximum security wing of the Federal Correctional Institution in Waseca, Minnesota, looked exactly as it had for the past decade. Kendra Singleton sat in the visitation room, her once stylish hair now completely gray, her prison uniform hanging loosely on her thinner frame. She stared through the reinforced glass at her daughter, noting how Elena had changed over the years, more confident now, carrying herself with the authority of the prosecutor she'd become. The appeal was denied, Elena said without preamble. Final ruling came down yesterday. Dad thought you should hear it from family. Kendra's lips tightened at the mention of Edmund. Her ex-husband had divorced her shortly after her conviction, though she lost everything that mattered long before that. Clay, she asked, though she already knew. She kept tabs on her former lover through prison gossip and occasional news reports. Still in Florence ADX, Elena replied, referring to the Supermax facility in Colorado. The additional victims they found in Indiana and Wisconsin added another life sentence. He'll die in there, just like you'll die in here. The bluntness made Kendra flinch. Her daughter had developed a prosecutor's directness over the years, far from the manipulated young detective she'd once been. Your brother? Kendra tried, though Derek hadn't visited in 8 years. Running the Victim Advocacy Center in Milwaukee, Elena said, they're doing good work, helping trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. Some of them were victims of your operation, by the way. Did you know that? Women we unknowingly helped you trap? The bitterness in Elena's voice hadn't diminished with time. If anything, years of working with trafficking victims had only deepened her disgust with her parents' crimes. We thought we were protecting you, Kendra began, but Elena cut her off. Save it. I'm not here for explanations or excuses. I'm here because in 2 months, I'm starting as head prosecutor for the new Federal Human Trafficking Task Force. Joy Montgomery recommended me for the position. A ghost of pride flickered across Kendra's face, quickly replaced by shame when she remembered her role in necessitating such a task force. Does it ever bother you? She asked suddenly. Working with the people who brought down your father? Elena's laugh held no humor. Clay Holloway was never my father. The man who raised me, who taught me about justice and truth, that's my father. Edmund Marsh showed us what real integrity looks like, even when it meant exposing his own family's corruption. Miles away in Colorado, Clay Holloway sat in his 7-by-12-foot cell in ADX Florence, America's most secure prison. The legendary detective who had once commanded respect throughout Chicago now spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. His only visitors were his lawyers, bringing news of yet another appeal denied. Another cold case connected to his operation, another layer of justice ensuring he would never breathe free air again. The investigation that had started with Edmund Marsh's retirement party had spiraled far beyond Chicago. Over the past decade, evidence from Holloway's operation had led to the dismantling of trafficking networks across 12 states. Hundreds of corrupt officials had been exposed, dozens of cold cases solved, and countless victims finally given justice. In downtown Chicago, the Police Officers Association building had been renovated, its reception hall now hosting training sessions for a new generation of officers. The changes went far beyond cosmetic. After the Holloway scandal, the department had undergone a complete overhaul. New oversight procedures, enhanced witness protection protocols, and mandatory anti-corruption training all bore the unofficial name, the Marsh Protocols, among veteran officers. Dr. Tina Page's evidence system had become a model for witness protection programs nationwide. Her innovative use of distributed servers and blockchain technology to protect sensitive information was now taught at the FBI Academy. She'd finally retired to Arizona, but her legacy lived on in the procedures that had already saved countless lives. Edmund Marsh's retirement hadn't lasted long. After the trial, he'd been recruited as a special advisor to the FBI's expanded human trafficking task force. His experience with the Holloway case made him uniquely qualified to spot the signs of institutional corruption. These days, he split his time between consulting on complex cases and teaching at the academy, sharing the hard-learned lessons from his final case. Joy Montgomery had risen to deputy director of the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division, her success with the Holloway case launching a meteoric career. She'd made combating human trafficking her personal mission, building on the networks and methods they developed during that pivotal investigation. The twins had found their own paths to redemption. Derek's Victim Advocacy Center had become a model program, combining practical support for survivors with systematic data collection that helped law enforcement prevent future trafficking. His first-hand experience with corruption made him particularly effective at helping victims navigate the complexities of the justice system. Elena's legal career had focused exclusively on trafficking cases. Her unique perspective, as both a former officer and the child of convicted conspirators, gave her special insight into complex cases. Her conviction rate was among the highest in federal prosecution history. Dr. Alberta Maynard's forensic work had continued to connect cold cases to active investigations. She developed new protocols for evidence preservation that helped ensure crucial details weren't lost to time or tampering. Her collaboration with Dr. Page had revolutionized how sensitive case information was protected and shared between agencies. The impact of the Holloway case continued to ripple through law enforcement. New FBI agents studied it as a textbook example of institutional corruption. Police academies used it to teach the importance of independent oversight. Law schools analyzed it for its implications on witness protection and evidence handling. But the most profound changes were personal. Edmund Marsh, now in his 70s, had found an unexpected peace in helping others navigate the darkness he'd confronted in his own family. His relationship with the twins had deepened through shared purpose, their bond stronger for having been tested by fire. Every year on the anniversary of the verdict, they gathered at a small cemetery on Chicago's outskirts. Maria Santiago's grave had become a symbol, not just of justice served, but of the price of truth and the importance of standing against corruption no matter the personal cost. Elena often brought case files to these visits, updating Maria on their continued fight against trafficking. Derek would share stories of survivors who'd rebuilt their lives through his program. Edmund simply stood quietly, remembering the young woman whose death had started the investigation that exposed decades of corruption. The Chicago Tribune had recently run a 10-year retrospective on the case. The article had called it a watershed moment in American law enforcement, a case that had fundamentally changed how departments handled internal corruption and witness protection. But for those who had lived through it, the case's significance was far more personal. It had shattered illusions about family loyalty, exposed the toxic nature of institutional corruption, and demonstrated the true meaning of justice. Kendra and Holloway's betrayal had wounded many, but their exposure had ultimately strengthened the systems they'd sought to corrupt. Their victims had found justice, their unwitting accomplices had found redemption, and their schemes had led to reforms that would protect future generations. In her office at the federal building, Elena Marsh kept a simple framed quote on her wall. Visitors often assumed it was from a famous judge or philosopher, but she knew its true source, her father's words from that day in the courthouse 10 years ago. The truth matters, no matter who it hurts. Those words had become a guiding principle for a new generation of law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and advocates. The Holloway case had taught them all that justice couldn't be served through loyalty alone. It required courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to truth. The price of that truth had been high. Families had been broken, careers ended, lives forever altered. But from the ashes of betrayal had risen something stronger, a system more resistant to corruption, officers more alert to abuse, and protocols better suited to protecting the vulnerable. Kendra and Holloway would spend the rest of their lives in prison, their betrayal earning them not just legal punishment, but the lasting contempt of the law enforcement community they'd corrupted. Their legacy wasn't the power they'd wielded or the lives they destroyed, but the reforms their exposure had sparked. Edmund Marsh's legacy, by contrast, lived on in the daily work of his children, in the procedures that bore his name, and in the countless lives saved by the changes his investigation had initiated. His final case hadn't just exposed corruption. It had transformed how America's justice system protected its most vulnerable citizens. As Elena left the prison after her visit with Kendra, she pulled out her phone to check messages. A new case had just come in, possible trafficking operation, signs of law enforcement involvement. 10 years ago, such a case might have been buried by corrupt officials. Now, thanks to the Marsh protocols, it would receive immediate federal attention. She smiled slightly, thinking of her father's words about truth and justice. Some lessons, it seemed, never lost their relevance. The fight against corruption and trafficking continued, but now they had better tools, stronger protocols, and a deeper understanding of what justice truly required. The truth still mattered, no matter who it hurt. And thanks to the sacrifices made during that pivotal case, the truth had a better chance than ever of coming to light. Looking toward the Chicago skyline, Elena could almost imagine Maria Santiago and all the other victims finally resting in peace, knowing that their deaths had ultimately led to changes that would protect countless others. The price of truth had been high, but its value was beyond measure. The work continued, the fight for justice never truly ended, but the foundations built from the ashes of betrayal were strong. That, perhaps, was the most important legacy of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.